Hello everyone, happy Saturday. Welcome to my Facebook Live today. I thought I'd share with you a little bit about my recent experience with Jonathan Altfeld and a training course that I did in Pennsylvania called GeniusMapping. And I see my cousin Paul is watching. Hey Paul, how's it going? What's up, cuz? And Adelita's watching. Hi everybody. So let me just say, hey Jimmy, what's going on? I'm gonna wave at all you guys. This is so fun. Okay. First of all, I had heard about this thing called GeniusMapping from my mentor, James Casados, who's an incredible teacher and trainer himself, and that's why I took his words on this in so deeply. Hey Maritza, how's it going? The thing is, when you finally find a teacher who has enough depth that it can carry you down that reality tunnel of what it is that you love so much, it's a big deal. For years and years and years, I've been seeking deeper and deeper training, and having found James and being introduced to this was kind of a big deal for me. Hi Lisa. Let me just get right into this because I asked James a while back. I said, hey, what should I be keeping on my radar as a person studying NLP? I'm going to be in this for life. I'm going to be a lifelong learner. I have a voracious appetite for this stuff, and I really appreciate what you have. What should I keep on the sort of radar for later on to study? And he said, beyond any question, beyond any doubt, knowledge engineering, or what's called genius mapping. Hey Petalin, nice to see you. Hey Biggie. So he explained it to me at the time. He said, there's this thing called knowledge engineering, and it's a bit like a very high level way of understanding how we model genius. When there are these freaks of nature, so to speak, people who are excellent at something, and they're a cut above everyone else in that particular topic, if you ask them how it is that they do what they do, very often they will kind of think about it and say something like, I don't know, I just do it. Or they'll give some kind of answer where there are large leaps in their description, as if they're just thinking that you already know the steps in that process because they haven't questioned it ever. So it's very common. Hey Paul, new friend there. It's very common for people to not even question how it is they do what they do. So these geniuses exist in every category. I mean, there are musical geniuses, artistic geniuses, there are organizational geniuses, leadership geniuses, people who are fantastic at sports or martial arts or really anything at all. Sometimes it's even something like, hey Hannah, my Australian friend, there are people who are just really good at emotional things. Like they're just masterful at maybe letting go of situations that no longer work for them. Or maybe they're masterful at developing connections and new networks, and they don't even know why. They're just fabulous at it. And Gabriel, how's it going, Gabriel? So I wanted to share about this because when you ask questions and you get a lot of leaps of logic, it means that person's not aware of why they do what they do. They're just unaware of the steps and pieces. They don't see the large chunks and the large leaps that they're making. They're just talking about it as if, as if you're going to know, and that you're just going to mind read, that you're part of their experience, and that really isn't the case. So genius mapping is this process where you can take those steps that are unconscious and start to get them to be a conscious series of steps, so that people who are mapping you can actually understand what your process is. It's a little oversimplified to say that it's a bunch of if-then statements, but that's a good way to start thinking about it. we have a lot of if-then statements that exist in much of our decision making. That would look something like, if this person says this to me, then I'm going to feel like X, in which case I'll have a variety of responses, maybe a series of responses that I might do. And then that will be, there might be a subcloud underneath that of, well, if he says this, then I might go this way. If he says that, I might go that way. If I'm feeling in this mood, I might go this way. If I'm feeling in that mood, I might go that way. And there can be all these different subclouds of decisions. And when you're doing a genius mapping process, you're learning how to understand the basic schematic of how those decisions are made. So the application for that can be really, really diverse. In a coaching setting, you can understand a lot more about what's going on underneath the hood, so to speak. Like in that subconscious space, a person's going to get more understanding of how and if their process is working or not working, what to do next, because they're going to see those gaping holes in where the leaps of logic happen. If it's a skill that you're mapping, then you're getting them to make those unconscious competencies more of a conscious description. So then you can then ask further questions if there are pieces that you don't understand. So it was 6 days, right? And we spent probably, I don't know what it was. I mean, usually we'd start around 9, we'd finish around 6 or 7. On some of the nights we went a little longer. And it's a pretty high AD kind of experience. And for those of you who are not NLPers, AD is like that, the critical voice in the head that's analyzing, and the computer voice, so to speak. So the whole time I'm in a room full of, PhD computer scientists, and I felt like the mental midget in the room, to be honest. And I was worried that I wasn't going to be able to keep up. A little concerned about that, because strong math background, strong logic background, and here I am in the room filled with these people, and we're doing logic exercises and various building blocks for the genius mapping process. But I have to say, for one, I'm proud of myself for not letting that feeling overwhelm me. I let myself just relax, breathe, enjoy what I was learning, and I had a meta belief that I was holding when I went into the class, which was, I'm going to get what I'm going to get, and anything that I get is going to enhance my experience of this particular thing, and I'll get useful things out of it, and anything that I don't get, I may get later, and it's okay. So it was pretty freeing to go in with that mindset. First of all, I didn't know what to expect. I've never trained with Jonathan before. And I was pleasantly surprised, and I can share this with you for sure. Jonathan is not only a very kind and noble human being, he's a good person, really good person. I got to know more about him on this trip because we spent time at dinner and lunch and before and after class and things like that. So there's that. We made a connection, and that was important to me. But also, he's a fantastic trainer. Fortunately, I have the experience of being trained with James Casados, and James Casados does things like share a bit of his process for training. So he's kind of like note to trainers, like this is what I'm doing right now, and he lets you in on a lot of those processes. So you're getting learnings on one level which you're aware of, and then there's a whole lot of other levels which you may or may not be aware of, or aware of to varying degrees. It's the same experience when I trained with Jonathan. He was teaching us, we were having fun, we were learning a lot of mentally taxing stuff, but he got us out of our chairs, we were doing brain gym exercises, we were he found different metaphors that he used as he told stories that were relevant. And what was really amazing is that he let us in more and more as the course went on to what he was doing as a teacher. And I thought that was brilliant, because I began to recognize the ways in which the shift of power happens, so that by the end we all felt very, very much like we understood what we were doing. We felt confident in it. We had lots of practice. So we got the chance at the end to feel like, okay, I've got this under my belt. I understand what I'm doing. I can go out in the world and I can use this. It's not one of those, NLP courses that you go out there and you just end up wondering, what did I get? Right? Have you ever had that experience where you go to one of these personal growth workshops or something and you're just like, wow, that was really cool. I'm high. I'm super dosed up on this positive feeling, but then how am I going to use this in my life? And at first you think you're going to be able to do it, but then a lot of it just sort of vanishes or it kind of evaporates because it's intangible, right? That wasn't the case with GeniusMapping. It wasn't the case in my training with James. Because their focus is being a good trainer, they use the skills, the NLP skills, to make sure that you know it and that you know it in your body, that you're able to demonstrate it, that you're able to not only understand it, in an intellectual, cerebral way, but in a kinesthetic way, that you're using the information. So that was really cool. GeniusMapping is one of those things that I think more people in the world should know about, but because it's not a very common thing, it's pretty rare that someone would understand it. There are a few people who, if you said, do you know what knowledge engineering is? They would say, oh yeah, I know what knowledge engineering is. But in particular, this is a special kind of knowledge engineering. I mean, imagine if you had one of those old dinosaurs at work, and he's really good at what he does, and he's skilled, and he has tons of knowledge, and the management or the leadership at the company is just like, oh my God, when this person retires, we're screwed, because how are we going to get the people underneath him to know what he knows and to be able to make decisions like he makes decisions or she makes decisions? How are we going to do that? And that's a real problem, because you could potentially alter the earnings. The whole thing could derail if someone gets sick or leaves too soon. So that's where GeniusMapping comes in, and what used to be called knowledge engineering 2.0, right? This is what this is. GeniusMapping is something where you could get a genius mapper in, spending time with the person who has the skill, and through this process you could map out more or less everything that's important to know, and you could create a system, you could create a document, you could create a tree of decisions that could be taught to people who have a basic understanding of it. They may not have that genius level, but it would give them a reference point, a key, a map, a compass, a way of understanding how to try on that expert's model in their own world, and then, of course, have a very enriched set of resources to work with. And that is really the point. It's not about making carbon copies. It's not about having one person be exactly like another. It's about modeling their skill, taking some of their genius and allowing you to understand that in steps that you can then begin to apply in that particular category. So that's pretty powerful. And I will also say that it takes time. You've got to be very patient. We were mapping out simple beliefs, and both positive beliefs as well as things in our life that weren't working well. And we mapped out skills, entire skill sets. And it takes a while. I mean, first of all, you've got to create this map of the basics and not block their flow. You have to get them talking, you've got to get them expressing themselves. And then you, as the modeler, as the person mapping, have to kind of make note of any potential holes in their description, but you can't stop their flow too much. Otherwise, you're getting them, in too much of a conscious state. And you want their reflexive thinking to come out, because that's what you're modeling, right? Then later on, as you start to, create little post-it notes or whatever, and you start to map out the skill, you're going to look for these gaps. Where are these subclouds of information that need to be filled in that are pertinent to what it is you're modeling. So it takes a lot of patience. I spent about 3 or 4 hours with one person just modeling out how I make connections, how I build connections, how I maintain the connections that I have, where and when do I use my connections in a way that feels appropriate, or recognize when it's inappropriate. What do I do when someone, I'm not getting along with them or something like that. And even in that 3 or 4 hour process, there were lots of holes still that need to be filled up. And I'm going to probably spend another 3 or 4 hours with that same individual mapping it out. So be on the lookout for an upcoming PDF that might describe that process one day. But if you're dealing with a much more complicated set of skills, not saying it isn't complicated, or diminishing networking, but I'm just saying, like a career path, someone has a skill at leadership in software development or in something else. It might take you weeks, if not months, to map out that skill. So there has to be an appreciation for why it's important. Otherwise, you wouldn't get hired to do the job, because it is a lot of work. But I gained new appreciation for it, I'll tell you that. Sitting there, examining what I was listening to, I feel like my meta model language skills just went through the roof. And for those of you who are not NELPers, meta model is it's a way of understanding the structure of a person's subjective experience, the way they express themselves. It's a way of understanding the way they're constructing their beliefs and thoughts. And so the meta model was based on the observations of Virginia Satir, a famous therapist. And in NLP, we study meta model for the purpose of enriching our ability to ask questions. So we ask questions, getting people to be more specific, and also to understand where there might be deletions and distortions and generalizations in their language. So it's a model that helps us to reveal structure behind the content that they're giving, whatever story it is that they're giving. Genius mapping has a lot to do with getting down to that nitty-gritty. I mean, there are other aspects to it, but I feel like the part I became most acutely aware of was my ability to listen more acutely to what it is that's being said, and start to become even more aware of what basic assumptions are there in the language. A lot of presuppositional language, things where you're presupposing that something's true even to say it. There are thoughts behind the thought, if you know what I mean. And if you ask that question, what's the thought behind this thought? It reveals more where you can ask next. Where would you go with your line of questioning? So super, super awesome. Incredibly valuable for me in a therapeutic sense, but also in the sense of doing business consultation, which I do from time to time. I feel like that's upped my value as far as what I can give to potential customers, clients, because this is something that even if I weren't mapping out their beliefs specifically, just in the advisory role, we have to be able to listen in a way that will reveal what the thought is behind the thought. So I appreciated that incredibly. I keep hearing myself say the word appreciation, so I think I must appreciate it a lot. Yeah. If you get a chance to look at Jonathan Altfeld'S website, just Google, I don't remember the exact URL, but just Google Jonathan Altfeld and the term genius mapping. Genius mapping. I know he's doing some changes with the site and everything, but it gives a description of where he's coming from with regard to the modeling process. Some of you who study NLP are aware of the statement within NLP that NLP is really about modeling, excellence specifically. When you hear descriptions of that, it brings to mind, this idea that you could grab a skill that someone else has and make it your own. Much like those who watched Heroes back in the day, the character Sylar. If anybody remembers Sylar, he used to steal people's superpowers. Anyway, there's a lot of talk in NLP about modeling. It's kind of introduced as this thing that you're going to be able to do when you're modeling. Or it's a thing that you're going to be able to do when you study NLP, and that NLP is the result of this, which it is. But you don't really see a whole lot of people. I can't think of anyone other than Jonathan Altfeld that's really doing a lot of teaching of how to do that. I mean, we get a little bit of an introduction to that in a master practitioner training, eliciting someone's underlying belief and values, matching physiology and things like that, and sequencing that out. And that can be useful, perhaps. But it sort of stops there, at least in my experience. Now, there could be somebody out there that's doing it and I'm not aware of it, but I haven't heard of it. And so even though this isn't specifically NLP modeling, it's kind of like another thing that's come out of what happens when you develop NLP to a high level and then you have someone with another skill. So Jonathan had the skill of working in AI, programming, and did some knowledge engineering stuff before. And so he's taken his previous expertise, his competence, and blended it with the competency that he's gained in neurolinguistic programming, and reapproached this idea of what modeling is from a different angle. And I think there's a ton of value in that. Ton of value, at least for me. And I so much so that I'm going to be taking it again simply as a refresher and to dive in a little deeper with him, maybe open up some more questions. I know he's teaching in January, so if possible, I'm going to go to his course in January in, I think it's in Orlando or somewhere in Florida. But even if I can't go in January, I'll be going to another one. So if you get a chance, check it out. If you have any questions for me about this, I'm more than willing to do my best to answer you. And if I can't answer you, I'll refer you to Jonathan Altfeld, who can answer it like an expert. I appreciate all you guys' time. It was nice to share and just kind of recap about my experience. I had a blast. I feel like I got smarter from it. I mean, how can you really say that? But it feels like that. Being in a room full of PhD computer scientists focusing on logic with you for hours and hours and hours a day, and telling stories and working on each other and asking questions. And I feel like I gained a whole lot of new architecture in my brain, a whole lot of new awareness kind of opened up for me. So very, very excited to share with you guys. Thanks for listening. Appreciate it. And we'll see you again next time. Ciao.